such as an old man trapped.
Then a little after 10 p.m., stage actor John Wilkes Booth fired a bullet into the president's head. Booth and a group of co-conspirators planned the assassination of Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, Secretary of State William Seward, General Grant, and others. They hoped to revive the Confederacy's spirits while General Joseph Johnston's army was still free and fighting. Booth's co-conspirators failed, though Seward and his son were wounded. But President Lincoln died the next day, April 15th, 1865. Andrew Johnson was sworn in as president at 11 a.m. on the 15th, about 4 hours after Lincoln breathed his last. After John Wilkes Booth was killed by his pursuers in late April, President Johnson established a military commission to try the surviving conspirators. They were tried, convicted, and several were executed before summer's end. Not surprisingly, people of the North and South reacted very differently to the assassination of Lincoln, as can be seen in diaries from the period. Caroline Richards of New York wrote on April 15th, Kate Stone of Louisiana, whose family had fled to Texas during the war, had a very different response. On April 28th, she writes,
"We hear that Lincoln is dead. All honor to J. Wilkes Booth, who has rid the world of a tyrant and made himself famous for generations."
Then on May 15th, she adds,
"Poor Booth, to think he fell at last. Many a true heart at the South weeps for his death. Lincoln's fate overtook him in the flush of his triumph, on the pinnacle of his fame, or rather infamy. We are glad he is not alive to rejoice in our humiliation and insult us by his jokes."
Certainly not all Southerners had quite that reaction. Sarah Morgan of Louisiana wrote,
"Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. This is murder. God have mercy on those who did it. And because I know that they would have apotheosized any man who had crucified Jeff Davis, I abhor this and call it foul murder, unworthy of our cause. And God grant it was only the temporary insanity of a desperate man that committed this crime. Let not his blood be visited on our nation, Lord."
Though Southerners such as Kate Stone might record private celebrations at Lincoln's death, those living in areas occupied by Union troops decided that they should at least appear to be in mourning. Sarah Morgan noted that the more thankful her neighbors seemed to be about Lincoln's death, the more ostentatiously they draped their homes in black. And many Southerners recognized that the assassination of Lincoln could mean disaster for former Confederates, now that the Union victory seemed inevitable. One such Southerner was the President of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis had fled to Charlotte, North Carolina, which would, for a short time, be the final capital of the Confederacy. When told of Lincoln's assassination, Davis said,
"I certainly had no special regard for Mr. Lincoln, but there are a great many men of whose end I would much rather have heard than his. I fear it will be disastrous for our people, and I regret it deeply.
Davis was right to be concerned, for the people of the North felt as much rage as they did sorrow at Lincoln's murder. The desire for retribution to punish the South was strong. After Lincoln's death, writer Herman Melville captured the anger and sorrow of the North and the trepidations of the South in his poem, The Martyr.
Good Friday was the day of the prodigy and crime, when they killed him in his pity, when they killed him in his prime, of clemency and calm, when with yearning he was filled, to redeem the evil-willed, and though conqueror be kind. But they killed him in his kindness, in their madness and their blindness, and they killed him from behind. There is sobbing of the strong and a pall upon the land, but the people in their weeping bear the iron hand. Beware the people weeping when they bear the iron hand. He lieth in his blood, the Father in his face. They have killed him, the forgiver. The avenger takes his place. The avenger wisely stern, who in righteousness shall do what the heavens call him to, and the parricides remand, for they killed him in his kindness, in their madness and their blindness, and his blood is on their hand. There is sobbing of the strong and a pall upon the land, but the people in their weeping bear the iron hand.
Jefferson Davis would soon get a sense of the people's anger as the war came to its end. Though it is common to think of Lee's surrender at Appomattox as the end of the Civil War, in truth, the largest Confederate army with almost 90,000 men was still in the field under Joseph E. Johnston. On April 17th, 2 days after Lincoln's death, Union General William Tecumseh Sherman met with General Johnston to discuss Johnston's surrender. Sherman received word of Lincoln's death only moments before meeting with Johnston. He later wrote,
"As soon as we were alone together, I showed him the dispatch announcing Mr. Lincoln's assassination and watched him closely. The perspiration came out in large drops on his forehead, and he did not attempt to conceal his distress. He denounced the act as a disgrace to the age and hoped I did not charge it to the Confederate government. I told him I could not believe that he, or General Lee, or officers of the Confederate Army could possibly be privy to acts of assassination. But I would not say as much for Jeff Davis. I then told him that I had recently had an interview with General Grant and President Lincoln, and that I was possessed of their views, that with them and the people North, there seemed to be no vindictive feeling against the Confederate armies, but there was against Davis and his political adherents."
Sherman sought an agreement similar to Grant's and Lee's, pertaining strictly to the military. But President Davis pushed for Johnston to get more of a treaty than simply terms of military surrender. He wanted political promises, such as agreements to recognize existing state governments and guarantees of property, while making no mention of accepting the end of slavery. Sherman, in keeping with what he believed Lincoln would have wanted, agreed to the terms, though he acknowledged that he did not have final authority. When the terms were sent to Washington, he discovered that the mood at the White House was now very different than a week earlier, before a man calling himself a Southern patriot murdered the president. The new president, formerly Vice President Andrew Johnson, ordered Sherman to agree only to purely military terms of surrender, which Johnston accepted. Jefferson Davis did not want to give up the fight. Brigadier General Basil Duke wrote about a meeting between Davis and a handful of brigadier generals days after Johnston's surrender.
After some conversation of a general nature, he said, "It is time that we adopt some definite plan upon which the further prosecution of our struggle shall be conducted. I have summoned you for consultation." After we had each given, at his request, a statement of the equipment and condition of our respective commands, Mr. Davis proceeded to declare his conviction that the cause was not lost any more than hope of American liberty had gone amid the sorest trials and most disheartening reverses of the revolutionary struggle. But that energy, courage, and consistency might yet save all. Even, he said, if the troops now with me be all that I can for the present rely on, 3,000 brave men are enough for a nucleus around which the whole people will rally when the panic which now afflicts them has passed away. He then asked that I should make suggestions in regard to the future conduct of the war. We looked at each other in amazement and with a feeling a little akin to trepidation, for we hardly knew how we should give expression to views diametrically opposed to those he had uttered.
Davis's generals knew that the war was over. Soon Davis would realize it as well. On May 10, 1865, Jefferson Davis was captured in Irwin County, Georgia. He would remain in prison for 2 years. He was released on bail, and the federal government eventually dropped its case.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.